today additional stakeholders, including the University of Victoria, involved here. So what you can see is a very large, complex, technically advanced integration trial. I'll take you through some of the champions. In Ontario, Brampton, and York region have been transit champions. That means that you've had great staff that have put a lot of time and labor into technically modeling and developing the trial. We have the National Research Council that has been brought on as a project manager, a neutral data analytics group. This is largely because transit agencies today, if you go out and you try and buy an electric bus or really a fuel cell bus, you're faced with a lot of OEM information, but you don't have a lot of neutral, non-manufacturer information, which is why we have the National Research Council involved. We have several hydro companies there, and the reason we have that is because when you plug a bus into the grid, your fuel source is electrons, it's not petroleum. And hydro companies in Ontario have been very positive in supporting the integration of these technology trials. And they have to plan from their own perspective as well. So here in Hydro, in Brampton, we had Hydro One Brampton, now Electra, part of the Electra family. And then you see the manufacturers along the bottom. Those manufacturers are on the busing side, New Flyer and Nova Bus part of Volvo Group internationally, and AB Group and Siemens. What we did in this trial a year ago was we called on multiple manufacturers of charging systems and buses. And we asked who among you is willing to standardize your overhead charging systems and your plug-and-play models. Nova Bus and New Flyer came forward, and this is a big issue for transit, making sure that if you buy one bus, it can plug into any kind of charger in the future, and vice versa for the charging station manufacturers. So we reached out to ABB, Siemens, and their competitors, and we said, who is willing to redesign their systems to be standardized for transit? And they came forward willing to do that redesign work. To put it in context, we're talking about millions of dollars of redesign work where they're making a choice to go to the open protocol standard fashion. And in theory, this should, well, in practice, it should allow transit agencies to have a much easier time picking and choosing in the future, knowing that everything plugs and plays. So to give you a little bit of background, what we knew in talking to transit agencies, York, Brampton, and several others that were part of the original discussions, was there was not enough information. What people wanted to know was not just what are the technologies out there, but when we plug these buses into our routes and we have people riding along them, say Route 23 or whatnot in Brampton, how much energy is it actually going to use? So what we found were transit agencies had no way of modeling out what their electron usage was. So what's your hydro bill going to look like at the end of the day? And how cheap is it compared to diesel? So what we did was we worked with our partners at University of Victoria, at Fleet Forward within National Research Council. My own team has several PhDs and postdocs on team, so we're a research team. We put together our brains and we came up with a new methodology for modeling out your energy consumption. And as we're aware, that methodology is now being used nationally. So what I'd like to do is take you through a little bit of the funding structure here. This is really fundamentally collaborative. The technology is complex, it's great, it's advanced, and it's global. So to bring it together, we had to bring in requested funding from the province, from the municipalities, from the federal government, and from the manufacturers themselves. So we were able to extract in a kind of quid pro quo investments by the manufacturers into this trial, which is fantastic. This takes you through the chargers. So on the charging side, it actually should say utilities and province, because depending on your jurisdiction, we ask for either the federal government and the province to share the cost or for utilities. And in some jurisdictions, like in York, the utility is co-investing into the station. Here, Hydro One Brampton, now Electra, has been supporting the development and design of the station location. And just on to the last slide, this gives you a little bit of the timeline. It's taken us 12 months of technical planning to get to this stage. These are really complicated things. You have transit with a lot of questions. You have hydro companies that have a lot of questions. Manufacturers that have to choose to redesign their global lineup and make a profit-oriented decision as to whether it's the right path or not. And then you have government stakeholders, municipally, provincially, and federally, all of whom you have to work with to educate, bring up to the level of technical understanding, and then move through the funding portal. So it's a brave new world for Canada. It's certainly a brave new world for Ontario, and Brampton is the first of our technology integration trial locations to be leading the pathway. So thank you very much for your leadership and for your forthright attitude in addressing this complex but very important landscape of zero emissions technologies. Thank you. And I'll pass that to Alex.
Thank you, Dr. Petronich. And the next few slides I'm going to go over is exactly what it means for Brampton as we go through the electric bus. I think we just went backwards in the slides here. So we're going to be deploying, pending all the finalization with the federal and provincial governments, two routes that we're going to be electrifying, so to speak. One is the Route 26 in the transit-oriented development in the Mount Pleasant area. And along the Sandalwood corridor, Route 23, we plan to have full electric vehicles on off-peak hours through the whole route. And by doing that, we're going to require some chargers at different locations because part of this trial is based on charging while en route, not overnight. So The charging points of the charger, I know that was asked last at the committee meeting how they look. There's a graphical depiction of how the overhead chargers look, and I've got a brief video on showing exactly how it works on the next slide here. And it's about a 1-minute video. It's actually in The charging times for the vehicles that we're working on the trial have about a 3 to 5 minute charging time at the end of each route. And in Mount Pleasant, we've been working with our planning group and Streetscape with Alex Tarano on where the appropriate transformers would be located and where we would locate the overhead chargers. And that would be on the north side of the railway tracks where we have a bus terminal there. So we'll have 2 charging stations there, as well as that's kind of a graphical depiction of how it would look at that terminal with the overhead charger. And then along the Sandalwood corridor, the Sandalwood route ends up at Queen and Highway 50. So there's a lay-by there where we have our Zoom stop, our station stop, so we'll have an overhead charger at that location as well. So it'll be at each endpoint of the particular route for charging to allow it to go for the whole day. The final steps here that we're looking at are completing the due diligence with the federal government, waiting the provincial ministerial oversight in terms of approving the final funding model that we've been working with them. And then again, one of the requirements through all the jurisdictions that have been participating is council approval, and hence why we're here today. And then at the end of that, we're going through our procurement process and working collaboratively with our procurement department on how we model this jointly with our different partners, with Cutric and others. And that's our presentation. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Councillor Spovieri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Alex and Dr.
Petronich.
Petronich or Petronic? Petronich. Thank you. I have a few questions. In one of the card you gave us, it shows three units actually in being pulled by the main bus. So does each unit have a charger, or will only the front unit will have a charger to recharge?
Is that on the back of your postcard?
Oh, I see. Sorry, I don't have the postcard in front of me, so I can't see the image. You're referring to this particular image?
Yeah.
So in this, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so this is actually part of our logo branding. It's not the actual bus that you're going to be receiving. The buses that you'll be receiving are a couple of the images that we had earlier on there. This is a Volvo image. This is where New Flyer is now going with multiple longer buses, but the buses that you're procuring or looking into are 40-footers. So it is possible to extend them in the future, but at this particular moment in time, the vehicles in this trial are 40-footers.
So it's possible to extend to 3 units?
This was actually a design for Europe. Right now it's not available in North America, unfortunately, this particular design, but we are trying to get there over the course of phase 2 and phase 3. If there would be routes that would be appropriate, and where we think this kind of design would be appropriate is rapid transit ways in the future.
So what I'm getting at through the chair is that does this replace LRTs, having been able to have 3 units? Is Europe going with buses rather than LRTs now? Is that the way of the future?
I can answer that if you want to, through Madam Mayor. For that question, again, it doesn't necessarily replace LRT. LRT modeling is done based on ridership demands, based on forecasting and the right technology for what type of technology, whether it's LRT or rubber tires, we call it in transit. So clearly, this would replace like an articulated bus that we have on the longer Zoom corridors. If we go to electrify, again, the capacity issues are still the same with either technology.
The reason I ask is because most LRTs have three coaches, and this one has a 3-coach.
That's
so
right.
just wondering whether Europe is moving towards buses rather than LRTs, if it's the way of the future. Actually, I did read an article when we were doing the LRT study that these seem to be more advanced technology than LRTs. They call the LRTs old streetcars, and they refer to these in Europe as the way of the future. The other question I have through the chair is the charging time. You mentioned now. How long will the bus run on one charge? Do you have a charger at every stop, or do you have a charger at the beginning of the route and at the end of the route?
In Brampton, the way we've designed it is the charger will be at each end of the route. And the charging times, I'll let Dr. Petronich talk more about that, vary depending on the bus manufacturer, and I'm not sure what's proprietary yet or not, so I'll allow Dr. Petronich to speak to that for the charging times.
Certainly, and thank you through the chair, Madam Chair. So charging time depends on a few items. One is how heavy is your bus. So charging times can, of course, vary between 2 to 3 minutes up to 12 minutes. And what this depends on is how many people are on your bus, what's the topography of the hills and the roads, what are the weather conditions and the friction and the aerodynamic drag on the vehicle, how much stopping and starting is there, therefore how much regenerative braking is being developed, and how efficient the motor is at certain speeds. So all of those variables together combine to result in sometimes differing charging times on the exact same route at differing times of the day. Roughly, we did a modeling, as I pointed out to you, we developed an energy consumption modeling activity, and that modeling also predicted charging times for Route 23 and Route 26. And it looks like based on our best analysis, based on our analysis of your topography, your ridership, your stopping and starting, the number of crossroads you have, and some predictions around pedestrian jaywalking, we've come up to a conclusion that your charging times are going to be between 3 and 8 minutes.
Okay, and through the chair, and does it ever happen that the bus may run out of charge somewhere in the middle of the route? Does that ever happen?
So thank you very much for the question through the chair. So far there's no evidence that could ever really happen. Certainly if you took a vehicle like any vehicle with a fuel source and you drove it out without any intention of ever plugging it in, it's going to run out of fuel at some point. But specifically as part of this consortium, one of the reasons it took 6 to 8 months of technical planning was we mapped out the routes, we mapped out the battery technology, we mapped out the charging systems. So there's almost a guaranteed non-fail possibility here. And in each of the cases with the batteries available on the buses plus the charging infrastructure, we've built in a lot of buffer. So there's a lot of buffer so that you could do a couple runs and come back in some cases, or do a run and a half or 2 runs before you actually have to plug in. So a lot of redundancy built into the system to ensure no failures.
So all these factors have been taken into account when you laid out your plan then?
That's right.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Moore. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was very interesting. I just have a question around, and the briefing note that we got, Alex, thank you, was very helpful. When you talk about the electric bus maintenance cost is estimated to be 50% less. That's certainly going to be beneficial for municipalities as we, especially Brampton, as we expand transit in our growing community. But how much, I hear all the time, electric vehicles, it's the cost of the battery. How long does the battery last? And what's the cost of it on replacement? Is there statistics available for that?
Absolutely, and through you, Madam Mayor, there's a lot of statistics available on that. The manufacturer does warrant the batteries for a period of time, and all those battery costs and replacement costs have been calculated in our maintenance costs as we did the analysis.
Oh, so they're included in this, they're not?
That's correct.
Oh, that's good news. Thank you. Councilor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. Essentially, it was around, I guess, the batteries, and in terms of where we're going with technology and the rapid change, because I know even when it comes to cars, there seems to be, some issues in terms of the lifetime and the driving time of battery use. But do you expect that technology will still evolve in this area, that will even get it more efficient and more cost-friendly?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much for your question through the chair. So there's a few questions embedded in there. And one thing I should point out is the difference between passenger cars that are electric and transit buses. This really has an impact, of course, on their technological design because cars are sitting dormant 95% of the time. But buses are up and running, and ideally you have them up and running 24 hours a day. So in terms of technology development, a lot of the suppliers have been looking at degradation cycles on the battery platform. What we expect to go forward is right now, if you were to look internationally at research into battery chemistries, there's at least 30 different battery chemistries that are being researched right now. Typical lithium-ion chemistries are what is pretty much the industry standard right now. They have very good durability, ruggedness, degradation profile, et cetera, and the supply chain is growing, which means the price per kilowatt hour is dropping. But is it possible that in the future there'll be solid-state batteries and other energy storage devices on board? Absolutely, and that we should move towards that direction. In the same way that diesel engines have radically changed over the last 20 years. They've gotten half their weight, they've gotten smaller, more efficient. So there is no doubt there will be energy efficiency technology being embedded into future vehicle designs. But of course, we have pretty good systems available right now.
Excellent. And sorry, just to Councillor Spaveri, I just want to correct you. There's been an expansion of LRTs actually across the United States and in Europe. So this might be integrated, but it wouldn't be a replacement because LRT seems to be expanding quite rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Dillon.
Just a quick question about the actual charging station. For the charging station itself. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm just wondering, is there, so the charger itself, does it have a battery within it, or is it just taking batteries, like the flow of electricity straight from another source?
Thank you very much for your question through the chair. It's a great question, and in fact, you've just predicted our phase 2 of this integration trial. So these overhead charging systems are designed to pull electrons from the grid directly. From a power quality level, it's 450 kilowatts that they're delivering, or 300 kilowatts. So that's a really high power system. To put it in context, my Nissan Leaf plugs into a 7 kilowatt charger, right? So you're talking about a lot of power coming off the grid all at once to power these vehicles. Where we're going in phase 2, because in phase 1 right now, this trial, they don't have energy storage embedded in. They're just pulling energy off the grid. There are power electronics that buffer the charger from the grid, of course, but there's no energy storage device per se aligned with the charger. In phase 2 of this trial, technical planning for which starts this year after we launch phase 1, it's the goal of getting towards energy integration, so a battery pack integrated into the charger that would allow you, for example, as a transit agency, to have your bus powered by solar or renewable slumps that come onto the grid in the middle of the day. This is a challenge for Ontario right now, that we have a lot of renewables coming onto the grid in the middle of the day when nobody's using them. How do you use that up efficiently or at a low cost? You put it into a battery, you stick it through a charger, and you power up your buses. So that's where we're going into phase 2. They're not part of phase 1 right now, though.
So last question, is there, because you mentioned solar as well, is there potential, or is this something that's maybe even an idea down the road where there's some type of technology where these buses, I guess, power themselves through solar or some other means, some other source? Is that something that is within your vision or possible in the near future?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your question through the chair. So it's not just a vision, it's reality today that there are technology demonstrations already in Canada. They have been on a smaller scale, and we're looking to integrate them into phase 3 of our trial. So at a smaller scale, BCIT, which is the British Columbia Institute of Technology, BACA, which is a corporation of software here, it's actually along the 427 highway. If you drive by, you'll see a solar canopy. There's also University of British Columbia and York University that have solar canopies that go into charging devices via energy storage devices to power vehicles. So they already exist in small scale. Companies like Samsung, Panasonic are integrating their solar panel systems with their energy storage. The next step, the holy grail, is to get it into transit, to basically deliver to you free electrons to power your vehicles. So what we're looking at, we work with a couple companies, one of which is SolarShip, a few other Canadian companies that are experts at integrating solar panels into energy storage devices. Once we get these on-road chargers up and running and design them within your urban community, it is entirely feasible to integrate integrate solar panels at the site of charging, as well as smaller solar panels on the vehicles themselves. Typically, solar panels on a vehicle are not sufficient to power the propulsion system. It's not enough electrons coming through, and solar panels themselves are not efficient enough at converting electrons to power your motor on board. But what they are good at is powering auxiliary systems, your radio, your windows, your heating system, your idling, and there's a lot of emissions associated with auxiliary systems. So both are definitely feasible, and in one case, with the integration of solar at the site of stations, it exists already.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I was reading I think it's great that we're becoming leaders in this initiative as well. I was reading a report, or an article rather, about a week ago. I think in China there's such an issue with pollution from emissions that there's about 4,000 deaths a day related to the pollution. So I think where we're headed is good. It's going to benefit everybody. So I just want to say, you know your stuff too. Excellent.
That's why we have her on board.
Solid answers.
Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Doctor, for coming back to do this here again today at Council. Thank you to Councillor Miles for showcasing this, bringing it out of consent for one, and asking for you to come back. As Chair of Community Services, Madam Mayor, I've asked you, and I'm asking you and Councillor Sprovieri as Vice Chair of Transit to come down for a picture to take with the doctor.
I will after I get rid of my list. Did you have any questions?
No, I was the last one. I didn't see Councillor Fortini.
I have a quick question as well after Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini.
I don't know want to be in the picture. Thank you, Madam. Just a quick question. We did see a video of this last year when we were going through the LRT, but they were charging as they pick up the passengers every stop. I think it was also in Sweden. But I also seen they're getting out of it as they're braking. It charges the batteries now. Is that a new system? Have we looked into that?
In fact, thank you for the question through the chair. So there's two items there. One is certainly they are charging while picking up passengers, and the idea is to minimize downtime, right? We always want to get to minimal downtime so the bus is operational. And so the idea is the robotic arm is releasing as soon as that brake is instigated, and it's releasing while people are getting on board. And while people are paying their fares, it's connecting, it's delivering the power, it releases automatically, and off the bus goes. So it's designed based on the modeling we've done right now to fit into your current routing schedule. So it's not creating added downtime. So you're correct in that regard. In terms of the second question, and in fact, sorry, the second question just eluded me now. The braking, the regenerative braking, that's right. So regenerative braking is a bit of a misnomer. People tend to think that it's a mechanical system, like you press a different brake and there's a regen brake. It's actually not. What regenerative braking refers to is just your motor operating in reverse, essentially. So in one direction, if you can think of it, it's essentially propelling you in one direction. And when you are braking, essentially the power electronics switch the motion of the electrons, and it starts to slow your vehicle down because the motor is moving in the opposite direction. And what it's doing is generating electrons back into your battery pack. So you have a motor on board for propulsion, and that same motor is your generator for electricity generation. It's almost like a wind turbine or a hydro turbine. In one case it's producing movement, in the other case it's producing electrons. So that regenerative braking is extremely important because it means that your bus is hyper efficient in stopping and starting scenarios. And if I can give you a bit of context, diesel buses are hyper inefficient in stopping and starting. Any gasoline or diesel thermal combustion engine is very bad when it's slow speed stopping and starting. It's not in its optimal operation zone. But an electric motor, in part because of regenerative braking, is in an efficiency zone that is optimal when you're stopping and starting. So it's ideal for what are the dirtiest episodes in diesel propulsion. It eliminates that in part because of that regenerative braking.
Thank you. And one more question. One of those, when I was watching, reading that report, that it's in here, you can go from east to west on a charge. Maybe a route to route and a half, depends, roads, snow, accidents, and all. The other report I read, you're only allowed to go up to about 50, 60 kilometers, and the batteries will go dead. They'll die down because of the charge. Is it because we're charging with 600 volts, and it's a different battery system we have, or it's because of the voltage we're sending into those batteries that completely different?
So if I understand your question, thank you for the question through the chair, it's are we allowed to go over 50 to 60 kilometers en route, or are there governors in place because of a voltage issue?
No, I've seen the route here that you're going from
Yeah.
east to west once on a charge, which takes about 12 to 15 minutes.
Right.
The ones I seen, that I read last year in Sweden, as they charge, as they pick up the passengers, if there's no passengers for 3 or 4 bus stops, they're allowed to go up to about 50, 60 kilometers, and the batteries will die down. Why are we going from one side to another? Is it because of the voltage we're sending into the batteries, or different batteries? Because we got 600 volts going in. Right?
So thank you very much for the question. Through the chair, there's actually a few components to your questions there. In one case, the battery pack itself
In the future, a lot of, like in China's using it, Sweden's starting to use it. They went into the reverse charging as you're braking, charges the batteries.
Through the chair, thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly, sorry, it's a little bit soft. My ears were probably plugged from my terrible flight from Halifax. But is it that the regenerative braking is? Okay, so
that would be in the future.
Well, the regenerative braking actually exists today, Madam Chair. So it is a fundamental component of all electrified vehicles. It's in fact. It is possible years ago to have bought an electric vehicle without regenerative braking, and there are some older vehicles that do not have regenerative braking on them, but pretty much every electric vehicle, truck, van, shuttle, pod, or bus has regenerative braking integrated into it. Now, I will tell you there's an interesting thing about regenerative braking. It's a software control. So it's not limited by the laws of physics so much as it is controlled by the laws of physics, which means you can set your regenerative braking at 30% or up to 70%. The impact is if you set it up to 70%, it means that you're trying to harvest back 70% of your inertia as you slow down. That's great for the transit agency, great for your hydro bill because you have a lot more energy, but the driver feels it. You'll feel it, it's almost like engine braking, you feel a real slowdown. So most transit systems right now are toying with the idea of setting it around 40%, which means you get some electrons back, like the buses give back, which is good, but it doesn't slow down so much that people feel the weight of that slowdown.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
So, Joe, before you go, can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
Can I ask who is going to be responsible for the charging stations? Is that a skill that our staff will be learning, or how will that be integrated into the system?
So what we're doing is we're working on a final model where a lot of the onus is going to be on the manufacturers to maintain. However, without getting into too much detail for proprietary reasons, we're working on who owns the asset. And we're hopeful that at the end of the day, the city will own the asset, but the maintenance contract will be with the manufacturer as well as some of it on us. And we'll have staff trained on that. It's all part of the whole model.
Interesting. Fascinating. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Miles for bringing this up. And I think we're doing a picture?
Yep. Sorry.
Thank you.
So can you see which one is headset? Please just make sure it's face this way. Okay.
Okay, sure.
That's not kind of scary. That's scary.
Sure.
I did it for you today, but I'm using it a few more times.
Thank you.
Fascinating. You made it easier for us to understand.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad.
Because you're smart.
I can get really data heavy, so I try and cut
No,
back.
it's very interesting. Oh, I think so many of us got a better sense of you have a lot of moving parts at this point.
There are.
If we can be of any help, let us know. I promise you guys if there's something.
We can mention it separate. Definitely, that will help.
I just want to support the work you're doing.
So far, everything is certainly.
Well, just say we're happy you're moving forward on it.
So are we.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your help.
The comments around the table were brilliant, so they loved your presentation. Thank you very much.
Harry, got some big shoes to fill. She's so she's looking hard pretty hard.
Okay. Council, we have a motion moved by Councillor Willens, seconded by Councillor Fortini, that the presentation on the Pan-Ontario Electric Bus Demonstration Integration Trial be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Our next announcement is Councillor Willens.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. It's just a quick announcement. The last week of February, we, in conjunction with the William Osler Health System, the fundraising committee, and along with Joe, our chief there, and Commissioner Patuska, we were able to raise another $72,000 for the Peel Memorial Hospital through that ski day. So a lot of our partners that we're familiar with around the community were involved as well. So congratulations.
I think you did it just in time before it got warm. Okay, we have no delegations today, and our next item is item 8.1. This is regarding the city's response to the Office of the Ontario Ombudsman's investigation into the City of Brampton's procurement practices, titled Procurement Progress, and this is item 9.2 on today's agenda. Both items were distributed to members on Monday, posted on the city's website the same day. We can bring forward and deal with the Ombudsman's report at the same time. And Mr. Schlang, I understand you're doing a presentation to introduce the report and the city's response.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and public. That's a hard presentation to follow.
Yes.
And I always under-promise and over-deliver, so maybe that I set the expectations low, that I'll give it hard to over-deliver. Now, I felt it was really important to provide you a quick presentation. We have provided the CAO report in response, the Office of the Ombudsman's report that you have, that was sent out on Monday night, as well as an appendix where we went through almost every item and provided some information for council as we move forward. But I felt along with that is really complemented, and as you can see from the title of his report, it really shows how this council and staff has made progress in this area, and and I'll talk to that a bit further. I felt it was important to show a bit of the background, the timelines, because if you think of how long this has been going on and the impact that it's had on the organization, just the investigation alone, to get this positive outcome is really good, and we'll talk to that a bit. And then maybe talk to you a bit about next steps. So the background, and these dates are important, and there's a couple dates that are missing here. Because if you look at it, May 4th, 2015, this council unanimously forwarded a resolution to ask the Office of the Ombudsman to come in and investigate real estate procurement and planning. But it was prior to that that this council was already talking to the office. It was probably, when I look at some of the dates, December of 2014, January of 2015. So you were already talking to the office to see if they would investigate this. Now, May 4th, you put the motion forward to look at those areas and any others that the office felt it deemed necessary to look at. And then really the office didn't have that authority from the province until January 1st, 2016. It was at that time then that you must have, you had directed the staff to submit some information to the office. And that happened in January and February. The office then reviewed that information, and on May 25th, based on all that information they'd received, decided to focus solely on procurement, not on the real estate, not on the planning, and not in any other manners. And then the bulk of the field investigation, what I mean by field investigation, was done from May to the end of October. If you recall, the council, we asked the ombudsman to come and give us an interim report in November sometime. At that time, the ombudsman said they had enough information, they weren't going to be doing any more interviews. So it was really around the November timeframe they had done a lot of the field investigation. But what's really important is that this council and staff, we did a major transformation in September. So look at these dates. So September, we decided to really shift this organization in a different way forward, a right angle turn. And we really didn't start to implement many of those actions till December. So the ombudsman really didn't get the chance to look at the new organization, interview some of the new people, the new way that we were starting to work within this corporation. And then, formulated their report in March. But again, most of that investigation was done prior to getting staff in place and the new transformed City of Brampton organization. Again, when they decided to focus on procurement, it was a very narrow focus on procurement, $29 million of the $273 million of purchases. So that's roughly around 10%, and what they called non-competitive procurement. And it was in that time frame from October 2013 to November 2014. So a very narrow focus, from very broad that you asked for to a very narrow targeted focus. Regardless of that targeted focus, there was this was a heavy investigation. I mean, what it did coming to you as a new CAO last year, everybody in the corporation knew about this probably in January of 2015, that this was starting to be discussed in May and then in January. And if you look at the amount of resources the office put in place, along with an advisor, Jeff Griffiths, who I understand was the former Auditor General of the City of Toronto from 2002 to 2015. Because this was their first systemic audit, they seek that type of advice. Through that time, from May to October, they interviewed over 30 staff and reviewed 10,500 documents. So, you just think of it, it narrowed down to that and all that investigation. When I started in May, I asked staff to track hours because I wanted to see how much time we were spending this and not on other things. It wasn't that it was incremental cost to the organization, but anytime you're spending time in this, you're not advancing the city forward in other areas. And we accumulated about 800 hours. Now that's probably the lowest. There was probably a bit more after that. Not everybody tracks, accordingly, but it was a minimum of 800 hours of staff time throughout that time period, leading up to today. And so you can see it's a very, very thorough investigation. It covered a lot. And the outcome is very positive for the organization, very positive for staff, very positive for council, that it did not reveal any maladministration. There was about 1.8 million that were outside of the bylaw, but your internal audit department at that time had already caught that, and council made direct corrective action in May of 2015 with the new bylaw that would avoid any of that type of reoccurrence again. So that was positive. You jumped on it as council and staff and corrected it. Therefore, under the Act, the Ombudsman does not have the authorization to issue a report with recommendations. It can only offer suggestions for the city to consider and for other cities to emulate and review the findings that they had and maybe they would like to take on. So that's an important distinction as well. In summary, when I think of the resilience that the staff and council had throughout this entire process to cooperate, as the ombudsman said in the report. Full cooperation is very positive that we can move forward. When we look at the recommendations in his report, well, not recommendations, suggestions to consider on page 28 and 29 of his report, I'm also pleased to say that with the new organization, we started to staff that in December, we really either initiated, completed, or underway on 12 of those suggestions. So they're moving forward. Some are complete already, and we can report that back to Internal Audit Committee to show you that, we've either done them, they're underway, or they've been initiated. So at least 12. We feel that suggestions 13 and 14 are positive, and we really want to investigate those further. This council and staff really solidified the independence of internal audit, reporting to Internal Audit Committee in that transformation. We really solidified that independence. I do not approve any reports that go unfiltered to the Audit Committee, and that's how it should be. But I feel that maybe that if we consider those two and investigate that for Audit Committee going forward, maybe for the next term of council, to have members of the public qualified, extremely qualified individuals from the public joining Audit Committee might be another way to show that strong independence of internal audit. At this point on suggestion 15, we feel that Brampton wants to lead the way. We feel that what we've established in the way of the new audit, the new disciplines within that audit process, within the disciplines of the Office of the CAO, not to approve, but to let those reports go unfiltered to Audit Committee, and really solidifying that reporting structure that functionally the individual reports to the Audit Committee, not to the CAO. That we feel that along with some of the other innovative approaches we're taking to continuous improvement will lead the way, not follow that recommendation, that suggestion. So again, I can't say enough about staff and council throughout this time and the resilience they showed, and the outcome is positive, that we can move forward and advance strategies of the corporation. So thank you.
Councillor Spovieri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Harry, for that presentation. I just want to briefly say that, while I'm glad that the results, but I think we need to be transparent and with the public, with the residents, and that the main reason why this investigation was asked for was not because there was a general feeling that there was irregularities going on with the procurement process at the City of Brampton. I believe that the procurement system itself, it monitors itself when major contracts are given out. Usually the bidders are very diligent, and they're very they keep an eye what's going on, and if there was any major wrongdoing, they would come forward, and which we did have a few examples that they did come forward to raise concern, and so generally speaking, I think that there's a safety net already built into the procurement process with the industry itself. So if something goes wrong and if something's not done properly, these people who are the major industry people who bid, they come forward and they come and they tell us that something. So we didn't really have a problem, and I think we have to be upfront and make it known that the main reason why we asked for this investigation is because of the one project that really that's still unresolved. That was the ombudsman did not touch because, and rightfully so, because of the lawsuit that's going on and a legal case, and it's perfectly right. But I think that if the province had been honest and them knowing that how the system works, they could have told us right from the beginning and probably saved a lot of time and a lot of money, and say, listen, we can't investigate what you're asking. The main issue was that we asked for the investigation, and we can do it because of the the lawsuit, and you know, and I think we could have been, could have saved a lot of aggravation, and but anyway, I have to say that I'm glad to see that everything else was generally being done properly, but still we have to be transparent and upfront with the public that the main issue that this investigation was called for hasn't been resolved yet. That's still to be resolved. So you know, once we have the results of this case, then we can move forward and decide what to do. But you know, the public should know that that the main issue has not been resolved. So I don't know if you want to comment to that, Mr. CEO, but I think we need to be transparent with the public and the residents of the city. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, as you saw in the Ombudsman report, that Council did request that they look at the southwest quadrant, and they said they would not, so.
Okay, that, Councillor Miles.
Well, I have to disagree with Councillor Sprovieri, because it was very clear the night that the Mayor brought forward the motion regarding the Ombudsman. I asked the question, is this about the southwest quadrant? And she said no. So it was, there had been allegations in regards to the procurement process, and that was why the Ombudsman was asked to investigate. Having said all that, I just have to say there's been a black cloud over the city of Brampton for quite some time since we've gone through this process. It has cost us a lot in man-hours and time, and at the end of the day, the Ombudsman, after going through 10,500 pieces of paper, found 2 places that he thought we could be looking at ways to correct it, and before we even received the report, it was corrected. So we need to stand up and stand proud of our municipality and of the practices and policies that we have put in place. And the citizens of Brampton should be able to breathe a sigh of relief that the city of Brampton is being well managed and has the policies in place to ensure that any funds, any procurement process that we do is done correctly and accurately, and the best bidder at the lowest cost is awarded that contract. That's what this says. That's the message that the public should be having, is that after all of this investigation, at the end of the day, there was nothing there. Nothing at all. There are some recommendations they've put in, but the Ombudsman said there wasn't even any grounds to write a report. But he wrote a few recommendations that he thought could strengthen our process, and that's a good thing. We're always looking for ways of doing better. But the message to the community is, and I think that we've made history today. I'd like members of council to know that the Brampton Guardian actually wrote an article that was factual and positive. And the headlines are, Ombudsman Report Clears Brampton of Misconduct. And it's interesting to note that the writer of the story was Radhika Panjwani. So, I can't remember the last time the Guardian actually wrote a positive story about the city of Brampton. So I am thrilled. I specifically opened it up this morning wondering, okay, how are they going to twist this story? And it was positive. It was the truth and factual. So kudos to the Brampton Guardian. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I put myself on the board. I would like to speak to the report, and I specifically wanted to thank our staff. I think that they were extremely anxious when the Ombudsman's report first came out with regards to the fact that he was going to investigate the city of Brampton. So I want to say thank you to them. I think they worked diligently and cooperatively, ensuring that the Ombudsman's office had all of the information that they needed in order to review our processes. I have read the report. Actually, I think I've read it twice now. And I think we can all say, I agree with Councillor Miles, that we are relieved to learn that the city has been cleared of maladministration in our procurement investigation. We have come a long way since 2014 in improving the practices at City Hall, and I commend the hard work of our CAO, who has only been with us, I think, 11 months, a little less than a year. I'm sure it feels longer, and I want to thank his staff in that success. In reading the report and the Ombudsman's press release, there is still some sobering language. Quoting from the release, he says, investigators did identify several areas where the city's purchasing practices and oversight of procurement could be improved, including training of staff and council members, following up on internal audits, and the function of the city's audit committee. And the report proposes 15 best practices to enhance transparency and public confidence. Transparency and accountability are really important to the residents of Brampton, and they expect us to take steps to ensure we uphold those values every single day. The Ombudsman captures that sentiment in his report and makes one recommendation that particularly stuck out to me, once again quoting from his release. The City of Brampton's recent past is filled with controversy, leading some members of the public, as well as members of council, to lose trust in the city, said Mr. Dubé. Establishing an independent, permanent Auditor General would help reestablish the public's confidence in the city and ensure the public trust the city has is to act fairly, accountably, and transparently. I urge the City of Brampton to consider this best practice as well as others contained in the report during the present reorganization and transformation. I believe that we have an opportunity to once again demonstrate leadership at the city to take steps to implement this recommendation by becoming one of only a handful of cities in Ontario to appoint a permanent independent Auditor General. Quoting from the Ombudsman's report, although there are similarities between an internal audit division and the function of an Auditor General, there are also important differences. Auditors generally report to Council or a committee of Council, ensuring their independence from municipal management. In contrast, the internal audit division functionally reports to Council, while administratively reporting to senior administration. The most fundamental difference, however, is the statutorily prescribed independence of an Auditor General. This lends credibility to his or her findings and helps strengthen the public's confidence that the municipality is acting in a transparent and accountable manner. We need to continue to restore the public trust in our local government. Inviting the Ombudsman to Brampton was only the first step in demonstrating increased transparency, openness, and fairness at City Hall. Let's show the residents of this city we're serious about transparency and good governance and appoint a permanent independent Auditor General. Mr. Clerk, I would like to put a motion on the floor that we follow that recommendation. I think you have the motion that the Ombudsman of Ontario released the report in early March in 2017 with respect to his findings and recommendations after conducting an investigation of the city's Brampton's procurement practices, and whereas the Ombudsman of Ontario reported 15 best practices to enhance transparency and public confidence, and whereas the Ombudsman of Ontario stated that establishing an independent, permanent Auditor General would help reestablish the public's confidence in the city and ensure that the public trusts the city to act fairly, accountably, and transparently. And therefore be it resolved that the City Council endorse the creation of an office of a permanent Auditor General that is independent from the Chief Administrative Officer and Council. And it's moved by myself and Councillor Dillon. Go to my board. Councillor Scovieri.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think before I can support this motion, we need more information, and I would like to refer to staff to come back with cost implications, specifically what the cost would be to have such an office here in the city of Brampton. Frankly, as I stated before, it was found by the Auditor General that there was no major problem in Brampton. There was only one major problem that hasn't been resolved yet. It's still to be resolved. I'm surprised that he didn't make mention of that in his report. But I'd like to refer this to staff to come back with a cost implication and justification for having such a new position here at the city, because frankly I don't believe that there is a need for given a past record and only one serious issue that the city faced and is still facing, I don't believe that there's a need to spend the money for this position. So I'd like to refer staff for a report, for a justification report and the cost implications. Thank you.
Speaking to the referral, Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I was going to move referral back to staff and ask that it come back to a committee meeting so we can better discuss and debate the issues. But specifically, in addition to cost, when staff, like in a referral, hopefully it passes, I think there's more than one way to achieve transparency, and the Auditor General is one. I wasn't particularly impressed with our last experience with an Auditor General. And I understand that, that was on one specific issue. But it concerns me that the other municipalities that introduced an Auditor General eliminated their internal audit function. And for me, internal audit is about continuous improvement. An Auditor General is more about, sort of retelling the story after the fact, and I don't see that as particularly helpful on an ongoing basis, on an issue-by-issue basis. I think that's, when required. But
are you speaking to the referral still?
I am.
Okay.
With direction.
Okay. I'm hoping you're getting there. Yeah.
I'd like we talk about Auditor Generals like we all know exactly what they do, and I don't think we do. So I'd like to see sort of specifics about, how they would operate within a municipal context. And Toronto is not necessarily the best example given their size and special powers, but you've talked a little bit, Mr. CAO, about the reporting for internal audit and that the reports are unfiltered, and our audit committees are open to the public, that they can come in and hear the debate and discussion unless it's something that needs to be in camera. But, I'm not sure that the public have that same privilege when it's an Auditor General. So I would just like to see sort of the pros and cons of this. I know that's, when it's put forward from a political perspective, you don't want to wade into that debate, but I think that there are some clear examples of how the residents in the city of Brampton might best be served. And that's not just financial, but it's in the interest of transparency. Personally, I think attending an internal audit committee is more helpful and useful to the community, where the minutes are published and anybody can go on and read them. But when we have all the information, I think is the time to discuss this. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson?
Yeah, speaking to the referral, I'll support the referral because I'd like to get some more information too, in particular about the cost of it and what the roles of council members would be in all this. I too wasn't too particularly enamored with the last Auditor General report that we had, so I kind of like to see some more information about how that would work, what the cost would be. And, if this was the last term of council, I probably would have said, just do it. But, we talked about the council and the public not having the confidence in staff before. I think now that's all switched. But I know I have the confidence in staff now that I didn't have before. And I think the public is now seeing all that too come around. And I think, and Councillor Miles is right, that yesterday's Guardian, I think, went a long way to putting out the truth of the whole report, and I think the public would be pretty happy when they hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Pleshy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll stick to the referral as best possible. I need to set the stage a little bit, though.
I'll give you some latitude.
Thank you. I think the Ombudsman came in at a difficult time at the City of Brampton, where we were going through some changes in internal audit. I believe they came in when we did not have a director, and then they did the investigation while we had an interim director, wrapped up the investigation when we had wrapped up and finalized the investigation when we had our new director. So I don't know if we would have had somebody kind of at the helm in that position, I don't know if the report would have been any different. I'd like to think that it could have been. with some of the comments about how, audit committee members could benefit from some education in terms of audit, I couldn't agree with you anymore. As chair of audit, am I an auditor? No. I never say no to any education that can be provided, but I don't plan on being an auditor. I'm a counselor, and I think that our CAO has identified the right steps in changing the audit function a little bit in terms of bringing on some community members with some background in audit. I think that's the right step. So I'll support the referral, but I'd like to see those steps go forward before we actually made this leap. And of course, I'd like to see some of the comments about the referral coming back in the monetary values and seeing how much that would cost. I would appreciate that as well. And I did have one other point, but it skipped my mind. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm going to run forward there. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking to the referral, but I would like to ask our new head of internal audit to come to the podium. There's one question I would like to ask her, and I think it's germane to the conversation. Okay. Hi. So my question to you is in regards to your role and your responsibilities as the head of internal audit. I tend to believe that our processes are already transparent and the policies are in place to ensure that everybody is accountable for decision making. But as an audit, I know you, auditor, or in your role, you have some responsibilities in regards to reporting facts and information. So do you know what I'm asking you?
No, I don't.
Okay, so I'm allowing a lot of latitude because you're really only supposed to be speaking to the referral.
Okay.
So if you can focus your question in the form of speaking to the referral, I'll allow it.
Okay. Well, in the terms of an auditor, you have, as an auditor, you take an oath that you are going to report information to members of council in a factual way, that you're not allowed to not disclose information. Like, everything that you do is governed by your code of conduct as an auditor. That's what I'm looking for, because I believe our auditor already does the kinds of things that we would be looking for in an audit general. But as a head of internal audit for the municipality, the role of the internal audit is far broader than what an auditor general would ever undertake. So,
is that a question?
So that's what I'm looking for.
I can speak to that through the mayor. So as an auditor, you have to follow very specific standards. So there's international standards on internal audit. And so irrespective of the role, you would be following those standards, which require independence, which require writing a balanced report, which require being factual in your findings and being factual in the statements that you make in your reports.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Speaking to the referral?
Well, I guess if I had a choice, I would just, no, I'm not speaking. I'll let it go.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Spovieri, seconded by Councillor Moore, that Mayor Jeffrey's motion be referred to staff for further review and report back to the Committee of Council on the justification, role, functions, and cost implications of establishing a permanent and independent Auditor General, including analysis of benefit and consequences. All those in favor? That's carried. We have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that the report and presentation of Mr. Schlang with regards to the city's response to the Office of the Ontario Ombudsman investigation to the city's procurement practices titled Procuring Progress be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Fortini, seconded by Councillor Pellecci, that the correspondence and report from Mr. Dubé, Ombudsman of Ontario, be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Our next item is staff report 8.2. This is regarding the supplementary information. City of Brampton initiated official plan amendment, Huron-Ontario Main Corridor, secondary plan lands generally fronting Huron-Ontario Main Street from Charlet Boulevard to south of Ray Lawson Boulevard, wards 3 and 4. At the February 22nd council meeting, a staff report and bylaw on this matter was deferred to today's meeting as a request of a delegation to allow staff at the delegation representing property interests in the area to meet and discuss concerns regarding this matter. The deferred item is listed on today's agenda as item 11.1 and was distributed at the start of today's meeting. We'll bring forward this unfinished business to consider with this supplementary report. Do any members have questions or comments on the staff report or recommendations? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I'm almost embarrassed to ask this question, but can you remind me why this was unfinished business? I know I read the report at Planning Committee, for Planning Committee. How is it that it found its way back here today separately?
Through you, Mayor Jeffrey, to Council, and then the Commissioner may respond. Council at its meeting on February 22nd had a report in front of it. There was a delegation that was added at the agenda requesting that there be further consultation with staff.
Oh, that's
and
correct.
Council deferred that matter to this meeting. That's why it's listed under unfinished business.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have no other speakers. I just have a council moved by Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Medeiros, that the report be received and the recommendations on 8.2 or 11.1? 8.2 be received and be approved. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. 9.1 is our next item. It's the final report from the Integrity Commissioner, Mr. Robert Swayze. Do any members have questions or comments on the Integrity Commissioner's report? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you. Just like to provide comments since I was one of the councillors mentioned in it. I have read the Integrity Commissioner's report and accept his decision that it was an inadvertent error made in good faith. One of my goals in this position is and always has been holding this council accountable in the best interest of our residents and to provide as much transparency to the taxpayer as possible. However, I do realize and accept that a technical error was made in not realizing an individual who was discussed in camera was also included in the email exchange with the councillor who lodged the complaint. Going forward, I encourage my colleagues to continue to use available processes to ensure transparency and accountability, including the closed meeting investigator and the ombudsman. We weren't elected to be perfect, no one is, but rather we were elected to be honest, and I'll continue to serve our residents with honesty, integrity, and respect. Again, I've read the Integrity Commissioner's report and accept that is his decision that it was an inadvertent error made in good faith. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spovieri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I certainly support Councillor Dillon's comments about inadvertently sending an email with people attached that he was not aware. Actually, that happened to me in the past, and there was a complaint lodged against me, and that was for the very same reason that I was not aware that a particular email was attached to a long list of emails that were going back and forth. So it's very easy to make that for that to happen, not knowing what's the people, not looking at all the list of people who were on the email, or looking all the string of emails that were attached to the string of emails. So I totally agree that it can happen without the intention of causing any harm to the municipality. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sparvieri. I have a motion moved by Councillor Willens. Oh, Councillor, or the clerk wants to speak on this particular item?
Thank you, Mayor Jeffrey. I just wanted to point out for members' attention, recommendations 2 and 3 from the Integrity Commissioner in his report. Recommendation 2 speaks to requesting staff to inquire about the city's errors and emissions insurance in terms of coverage for the Integrity Commissioner. And I just wanted to point out, if that's the will of committee, then staff will look into that. But the normal practice at the City of Brampton is errors and omissions insurance generally covers city employees and not contractors to the city or consultants. And secondly, in regard to recommendation 3, it makes a recommendation regarding an administrative delegation of duties from the lobbyist registrar to staff in terms of lobbyist registrations. And my suggestion would be, if council is willing to take this up, is that recommendation should be referred to the new lobbyist registrar and staff for consideration and implementation of any administrative improvements as deemed necessary.
Okay, so the second item, actually, we're not making a decision. It would still be referred to staff, and it would still come back to council for decision. So there's no decision being made in that particular one. Councillor Pelletier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And do you have the referrals on those 2 points?
What I have in front of me is item 9.1, which is the wording that is existing in your agenda right now. Essentially, that the report be received and that staff be directed to inquire from the city's errors and emissions insurance provider as to the cost, if any, of extending the policy to include coverage of the new Integrity Commissioner, report back to council. And what Mr. Fay is saying is that normally the individual, the Integrity Commissioner, that would be their responsibility, but we're not making a decision. And the third one is that he's suggesting that the item with regards to the registration of lobbyists be referred to the new individual. So we now have a motion. Do you have a seconder? Does he need a seconder? Can you do a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay. Councillor Medeiros will second.
Okay, so I'm happy to move that.
So
And,
is that going to change item 3? Okay. The 3, part 3 only, right? So you're okay, Councillor Pelletier, you're okay with 2? Okay, so Councillor Gibson.
Can you read out the motion, because I'm not sure what
You're doing? Okay. So Councillor, right now you have item 1, which is just receipts. Number 2 would stay the same, and number 3 on item 9.1 would read, recommendation 3 from the Integrity Commissioner's report be referred to the city's new lobbyist registrar and the city staff for further consideration and implementation of any administrative improvements as deemed necessary, which was the advice Mr. Fay.
Okay, so basically number 2 and 3 will come back to us then.
Yes.
But number 2 is asking for it to be referred back.
Through you, Madam Mayor, number 2 would result in a report back to council.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 is referring it off to the new lobbyist registrar and staff to look at those administrative improvements. And if they're deemed necessary because of the independence of the lobbyist registrar, if he directs staff to do that, we will follow those practices.
Okay.
But we haven't consulted with him yet on this.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Fay, I would assume that that individual would come and appear before council anyway, just to talk. So I think there'll be an opportunity for us to have a conversation at that point. So we'll take the amendment first, moved by Councillor Pelletier, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All those in favor? That's carried. And item 9.1, with only the first 2 motions as part of it, one being the receipt of the report from Mr. Swayze, and the second requiring staff to report back on the errors and emissions insurance coverage. All those in favor? That's carried. We're now at item 10, committee reports or minutes. We have 5 sets of minutes today. Under council's meeting procedure, the committee or section chair introduces their committee report or minutes and summarizes the matters considered that are now being brought forward to council today for ratification. Councillor Gibson, you chaired Member Services Committee, which met on February 13th. The committee minutes are here for council approval, and I pass the chair to you to lead council in the consideration of those committee minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You have the minutes of the Member Services Committee of February 13, 2017 in front of you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Mayor, I'll pass them back to you for ratification.
So we're going to do these all at the same time, aren't we, Mr. Clerk? Or do you want me to do them individually? Okay, Councillor Pelletier, you chaired Audit Committee, which... Okay, I'll just do separate. All right. I have a motion moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Pelletier, that the minutes of the Member Services Committee meeting of February 13th be received and the recommendations be approved. All those in favor? That's carried. Councillor Pelletier, you chaired Audit Committee, which met on February 21st. The committee minutes are here for council approval. I now pass the chair to you to lead council in consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Audit Committee meeting was called to order at 9:31 on February 21st. At approval of agenda, the agenda for the Audit Committee meeting was approved and printed and circulated. There were no declarations of conflict of interest, no consent. Delegations we had was, we did have a report from, or a delegation from Mr. Kevin Travers, partner, KPMG LLP, Chartered Accountants, regarding the KPMG audit plan for the 2016 fiscal year. Report item 6.1 was brought forward at that time. Mr. Travers, partner at KPMG, provided an overview of the audit planning report for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The delegation from Mr. Travers was received by committee. The report from Mr. Sutton that was brought forward, Treasurer, regarding the KPMG audit plan was received. The audit planning report for the year ending December 31st, 2016, prepared by KPMG Chartered Accountants, was received as well. Item 5.1, report from Ms. Felge, Director Internal Audit, results of the audit effectiveness survey. The audit effectiveness surveys are issued at the completion of every audit to receive feedback from management regarding the audit process. The survey showed that management was satisfied with the level of service provided. Item 5.2 was status of the management action plans. A number of issues were raised by members of the committee. The report from Ms. Felge, Director Internal Audit, was received by the committee. Item 5.3 was from the internal audit dated February 2nd, 2017, Corporate Fraud Prevention Hotline Quarterly Update. In response to questions from the committee, Ms. Felge, on an annual budget for the Corporate Fraud Prevention Hotline, and that internal audit is currently reviewing this service to identify opportunities for efficiencies and cost savings. The report from Mr. Damien was received by that committee. We adjourned the meeting. The next audit committee meeting will be held on June 6, 2017 at 9:30 a.m. with the call of the chair. Madam Mayor, pass it back to you for ratification, seeing no questions on the board.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moore, you chaired Planning and Infrastructure Service Committee, which met on February 27th. The committee minutes are here for council approval. I now pass the chair to you to lead council in consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering if we could deal with 10.3 and 10.5 at the same time. 10.3 are the minutes from February 27th. 10.5 are the minutes from the March the 6th and recommendations. So the February 27th are here for approval. We've dealt with the recommendations already. For the meeting on this Monday past, there was no statutory public meetings on that agenda. We added 6 delegations and 4 pieces of correspondence on really what was the single issue on the report, which was an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw for a piece of property in an application in Ward 10. And we had the minutes from the bicycle. What did I say? It says Ward 10 on here. We corrected it at committee, you're right, Councillor Sprovieri. So the recommendations are here. We had the minutes from the Cycling Advisory Committee, and it was not as quick a meeting as we thought it would be. But I see no questions on the board. Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I think I have to vote on these ones before we get into this. Okay. So I have motions moved by Councillor Pelletier, second by Councillor Moore, with regards to the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting to be received and the recommendations to be approved. All those in favor? That's carried. We have a motion moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Gibson, that the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee of February 27th be received and the recommendations be approved as printed. All those in favor? That's carried. And moved by Councillor Moore and seconded by Councillor Gibson, that the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee of March 6th be received and the recommendations be approved. All those in favor? That's carried. Committee of Council met on March 1st. The committee minutes are here for Council's approval. I'm now going to pass the chair to the respective section chairs in order of consideration during the committee meeting to lead Council in consideration of those committee minutes. Councillor Willens, you chaired Public Works section, and then I'm going to follow with Councillor Pelletier, Councillor Miles, and Councillor Bowman. Okay, Councillor Willens?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I did open the Committee of Council meeting on March 1st, 2017, and it was approved as amended. There was, I won't go through all the amendments, but there were 6 items added to the agenda, and I'll let each respective committee talk on those. There was 2 presentations from staff that fall under economic development, and there was also some items that were received. So I will go directly into the Public Works section. There was reports from Lauren Farrell, Senior Manager of Environment, Public Works and Engineering, dated January 11th, 2017, for request for budget amendment for the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund citywide. This report was received and a budget amendment was approved and a capital project to be established under the the Federal Clean Water and Wastewater Program. There was also a report from John Edwin, Manager of Development and Construction, Public Works and Engineering, dated January 23rd, 2017, initiation of a subdivision assumption, Star Sarah Homes, Humber River Limited, registered plan 43M-1771, north of Cottrell Boulevard, west of Gore Road, in Ward 8. This report was received and is recommended that the city initiate the subdivision assumption of Star Sarah Homes. There was a report from Manager of Engineering, Capital Works, Public Engineering, dated January 23rd, 2017. Request to begin procurement, purchasing bylaw 4.0, road resurfacing with the City of Brampton, all wards. There was a lot of discussion on that, but that was received, and funding from various capital projects, accounts, and purchasing agent has been authorized to commence the procurement for road resurfacing within the City of Brampton. There was one was in consent. There was 9.2.5, the Senior Project Engineer, Bridges, Capital Works, Public Works and Engineering, dated January 26, 2017. Council authorization to authorize the purchasing agent to commence procurement for bridges. The report was received, and that the purchasing agent will be authorized to commence the procurement for the rehabilitation of recommended roads and bridges. There was also another report from Traffic Operations Technologist, Public Works and Engineering, dated December 21st, 2016. Read the alternate process consideration for all stop signs, always stops in wards 9 and 10. That report was received and is recommended that a bylaw be passed to amend Traffic Bylaw 93-93 to implement always stop controls with the following intersections: Bliss Street and Garden Brook Trail in Ward 10, Braden Boulevard and Merlin Drive, Pally Drive, Ward 10, Myra Creek Drive and Abitibi Lake Drive, Tonham Brook Crescent in Ward 9. There was also a report from Traffic Operations Technologist, Public Works and Engineering, dated January 11th, 2017. Always stop from Maitland Street and Manson Street in Ward 7. That was received and was recommended that bylaw be passed to amend the Traffic Bylaw 93 for this intersection. The Brampton School Safety Councils were in consent, and there was a correspondence from Legislative Specialist of the Region Appeal, dated February 3rd, 2017. Amendments to the Traffic Bylaw 15-2013 resulting from capital projects and recent development activities across the region. Appeal all wards. So now, seeing no questions, I'll pass it back to you, Mayor.
Councillor Pelletier, you chaired Community Services section.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 6.2.1 was a report from the Chief Michael Clark, 2017 user fee amendment, fire and emergency services responses to motor vehicle collisions. The report from Michael Clark was approved and received by committee. There was an additional report from Michael Clark. He was busy that day. Committee members expressed satisfaction. Try that again. Satisfaction with the high rate of compliance to the revised fireworks bylaw. Consideration would be given to patrolling parks during fireworks events where remnant of fireworks were found. There was a few items in consent, one that was pulled by Councillor Miles, it's the Pan-Ontario electric bus demonstration and integration trial, and I had a whole long thing about that, but I'll skip that as we went through that earlier, but that report was received, and at the request of council, that staff report to council with further update following the conclusion of phase 1. A few more items were in consent. The final report was item 6.2.8, opportunities and implications to amend the lottery licensing bylaw to waive the mandatory $45 per event bingo license fee for non-profit seniors groups conducting bingo games at city facilities. A spirited discussion followed the report from Miss Wilson, lottery licensing clerk, city clerk's office was received, and a bylaw be passed to amend the lottery licensing bylaw 121-2012 to exempt the payment of the required charitable bingo lottery licensing fee of $45 per bingo event in the following two non-profit seniors groups, Knightsbridge Seniors Club and the Brampton Senior Citizens Council. A recorded vote was requested and the motion carried 8-2. Seeing no questions on the board, Madam Mayor, I pass it back to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miles, you chaired Corporate Services section.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council. You have before you the minutes of the Corporate Services sections of Committee of Council. I trust you've had enough time to read those. Are there any comments or questions? There being none, I hand it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bowman, you chaired the Economic Development section.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. Council, you have before you the minutes of the Economic Development section from the Committee of Council meeting. We had a standing presentation on economic development from Michelle McCollum on the University Work Plan update. She talked about David Johnson Research Centre and Technology Park at the University of Waterloo and filled us in on the work that they're doing. We also had a discussion about the February 15th, 2017 meeting of the University Blue Ribbon Panel, at which the panel agreed its mandate had been fulfilled, and we discussed next steps in the work plan. That led to a very lengthy discussion about who should be included as people to work with. We had suggestions. The Honourable William G. Davis continues to be engaged. Then we had changes to it to include J. Paul Massey Singh, former Vice Chair, and the amendment above was to have anybody on the Blue Ribbon Panel be able to be contacted. A recorded vote was requested, and that did pass 6-5 on that report. So that carried, again, 6-5. We then went on and had a presentation from the event specialist about the farmers market, all sorts of statistics and figures about the 2017, how we did in the 2016 farmers market, and what we're going to be doing moving forward in 2017. We looked at the history of the Brampton market, the downtown farmers market program, Artist Alley enhancements, Mount Pleasant Village market, new harvest market, and whether we continue on with the Christmas market in a different format. We had a report from Bob Darling, Director of Economic Development Culture, dated February 1st, regarding the 2016 Citizens Award. Committee was thanked for their efforts, and we did pass the award recipients for those Citizens Awards, so that will be coming up shortly in a award ceremony, and I hope everybody can make that from council. We had a report from Kelly Stahl, I should say, on the year-round market. Bob Darling also updated us on the post-mission information, United Arab Emirates health sector. That was a report. And we had, under 8.31, new business, the request for city's financial support for the assistance of the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Vimy Ridge, commemorative service and parade, and that was approved as well. I see one speaker on the board, Councillor Willens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the Chair, I would like to propose an amendment to 8.1.1, specifically recommendation CW 080-2017, and I'm recommending that it be deleted and replaced with the following, and I think you have it, do you, Earl, that you can put on the screen? So I'll let you read that there. Thank you,
Very much, and my rationale for the amendment to this is simple. We've agreed that as a committee of council that the mandate of the Blue Ribbon Panel has been very successfully concluded. Their contribution to the project is vital, has been very vital rather, and has been well acknowledged and will be appreciated for years to come. However, the Honourable William G. Davis, the former Minister of Education, is one of Ontario's most esteemed and respected premiers and continues to hold a uniquely Brampton insight on this matter and continues to command the respect of and provides counsel to senior elected officials and staff at Queen's Park. There's other reasons behind my rationale. He was the Minister of Education, Minister of University Affairs. He created 2 new universities, Trent and Brock, established TV Ontario Educational Television Network, TV Ontario, He also has 5 schools. I got the William G. Davis Public School in Brampton. We have the William G. Davis Senior Public School in Cambridge. There's the William G. Public School in Scarborough. There's the Davis campus here at Sheridan College in Brampton. There's a W.G. Davis building of University of Toronto in Mississauga. And there's also the William G. Davis Centre for Computer Research in the University of Waterloo. He's known around Brampton and around the Ontario as Brampton Billy, so he's certainly somebody that I would like to be in our court. So that's my rationale, and I'll wait to hear from other councillors.
Okay, we need a seconder for that.
Oh, sorry, can I get a seconder?
Councillor Moore, thank you. We do have another speaker on the board.
I'll take mine off.
Councillor Medeiros.
Through the chair to staff, can you confirm that the application process has been finalized for universities to apply?
Madam Mayor, the applications for universities to apply closed on Monday, this Monday, the 6th of March, and we're having our first discussion with provincial staff this afternoon, later in a conference call about the submissions.
So, if I'm understanding, then schools right now that haven't applied won't be able to apply because it's closed. So whatever is done from a school perspective.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is my understanding. However, it is the province that's leading this process and not city staff. So I can't categorically say that, but that is our understanding.
So through the chair, will the provincial staff be consulting with the municipality on their decision?
We anticipate so, but again, we are having further discussions with the province this afternoon about what next steps are for our continued conversations.
Okay. So I guess this goes back to, it seems like we're going round and round. What I would suggest, and to stop this nonsense a little bit, is if we add as required to the motion. So I would ask an amendment. And again, I just find this wasn't necessary. I think in terms of the value added or the value proposition, certainly, Mr. Davis is, you read his bio, but right now it's with ministry officials. So political support, I'm not sure what type of political support. Obviously, if we're engaging with the community in Brampton, we do provide that support. You can request upon him. So I really don't understand, Councillor Willens, what you're doing here. And I'm surprised that this comes before us, but if so, then I would just ask that you accept the friendly amendment to say as required, so it doesn't require staff to have to spend more time trying to consult with, externally, because I don't see the role right now.
Okay. We will go to Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Councillor Willens. Are you asking here that staff be requested to ask Mr. Davis to engage? Obviously, it says that, but it doesn't officially give him any status. It's just a matter of staff asking him to help us go along with this. Is that what you're? It's all in the city's hands right now, in the province's hands, as far as the back and forth. Is this what this is saying?
Councillor Willens, you want to respond?
Basically, yes, in a nutshell, it's to invite him to be engaged, yes.
Okay.
So it's not taking any power away from the staff.
Okay, then I don't have a problem with it. I think that it's in staff's hands now, and that's where it should be, but Mr. Davis certainly is somebody who we've leaned upon for many years, and has helped Brampton. Of course, he is Mr. Brampton, and I see no harm in asking for his help if we need to have that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Dillon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I believe, I think the last time we had the discussion, the staff, it's in staff's hands now, but staff will be on a need-be basis discussing or getting advice from anybody who is on the Blue Ribbon panel. Is that correct, Michelle?
That is the outcome of the motion, I believe, through you, Madam Mayor.
Right, and so I understand, I guess, from the discussion we had last time, it was a symbolic gesture, and I don't deny, Mr. Davis's contribution to Brampton, to Ontario, but I just want to reiterate what I had said last time, that what more symbolic that if we're going to invite anybody to be engaged in the process going forward, we invite all members of the Blue Ribbon panel. I think they represent the community, and it's a good gesture, and it's a symbolic gesture to show that this was initiated by the community. It was done by the community, and again, we invite the community back. So that's what I had stated last time, but I'm not really sure what this what it accomplishes really, because staff is already going to be contacting anybody who's already contacting anybody from the Blue Ribbon panel. So I don't think it's appropriate to single one person out. It kind of puts down everybody else's contributions. I think everybody, I was in the meetings, everybody had great input and they represented different backgrounds and were from different fields, and so I think that would be more appropriate, but I guess we'll see what the rest of the discussion is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Medeiros?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the Chair, to lower the motion, I had requested as needed, and I think it's on the principle that several councillors, and we've said that since we brought in a new CEO, that we don't want to interfere with the work of staff. We don't want to interfere with the ongoing. So I would ask that we leave it at their discretion and they do it as required, as needed. So I'm looking to the mover of the motion to accept as needed as an amendment.
Councillor Willens?
Through Councillor Medeiros, through you, Madam Mayor, I'm going to leave the motion as is.
So I'd ask for a recorded vote on the amendment. And again, I think this is almost a farce, I find. This goes back to, I think a councillor once talked about sheep and talked about the way that, people get followed, and this is one of the most bizarre.
Councillor Medeiros,
this is one of the bizarre. No, Chair, I think this is one of the bizarre. This is a bizarre. Once again, this is a demonstration of, something that, clearly everyone knows what's going on here, and clearly we know what's, Councillor Willens to say. Now you're directing staff to force them to engage a process. So what does this mean? So I'd like to have you understand that how much time are you expecting staff to dedicate to, engage with the resident? What does that mean? So you're basically going to tell them, go engage with this resident. So what essentially does that mean? What type of engagement? Is there going to be a work plan? Is it as required? If he requires a meeting, if Mr. Davis requires a meeting, does staff have to go whenever is required?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Medeiros, the motion simply says that staff be requested to contact the Honourable William G. Davis to invite him to be engaged on the ongoing university program. Nothing more than that. If Mr. Davis calls a meeting and the staff can't make, it's not demanding staff goes at the beckoning of Mr. Davis.
So then why would you accept the amendment as needed?
I'm not.
So essentially you're forcing staff to engage in that's essentially what you're doing. You're directing staff. This council talked about not interfering in the work of staff, but you're directing staff. Councillor Gibson, you have said it several times, we should not be directing staff to do any of the work, that we should stay out and let the CAO and let this new composition do their work. But now you're directing staff to have to engage with an individual instead of allowing as needed, allowing the staff discretion when required. Anyways, I'd like to record a vote on as needed, please. I need a seconder.
So we can still go through the list. Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
I just wanted to just simply state that I do support the motion. I think we spoke, the amendment rather, that we've, in the recent weeks, we've spoken about a lot of staff resources and trying to allow staff to really do their work, and I think this does take away from that. I think they need to have their focus on working to get to choose a partner for a university, eventually get a location as well. So I don't see the harm in putting as needed. This almost, in my opinion, kind of forces them to be engaged, and there's really no parameter set to it. Like what, maybe if Councillor Willens can answer the question as to what do you envision? Like what are the parameters around this? Like what is his exact role, and what are you looking at? Because it's really vague, but it could mean a lot of different things. So maybe if you could just kind of narrow it down just for the council, I guess that would be appreciated.
Councillor Willens, you have a reply after the other speakers? Is that what you just said? Okay. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I'd like to
Thank you, Councillor Dillon, by the way.
I'd like to call the question on the amendment and on the main motion, please.
Okay. Only those who have not spoken yet to the amendment. Councillor Gibson. Mr. Clerk, has Councillor Gibson spoken to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I haven't. I didn't speak to Councilor Joseph.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Call the question is usually a call the question on the question, which is the entire debate that's before us. If we get into call the question on every amendment, this could be it's not a normal practice because that could be a very long debate. So I understood what Councillor...
And I agree with the clerk, and I'd like to rise on a point of person privilege, as Councillor Miro mentioned my name. Can I do that?
A point of personal privilege, if recognized by the chair, a member is granted the floor.
Go ahead.
Councillor Darrell. That's exactly why I asked the mover whether or not this forced staff to give Mr. Davis any status on the committee. Because I don't think we should, but I have no problem with asking for Mr. Davis if staff feel that they want to reach out to him and ask for his help if they need it. That's it. So you're talking about me wanting something different is wrong. That's why I cleared it with I didn't know this was coming. I don't know what you're talking about cheap, but I didn't know this was coming, so I just want to make it clear that I don't think staff should have to ask anybody. But to reach out to Mr. Davis to ask him to be engaged, I think it would be helpful. And I don't have a problem with that, as long as we're not asking for staff to meet with Mr. Davis every time they want to go forward, when they have meetings. I don't think there's any harm in doing that, so.
Support the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gibson. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't see a big problem with the motion as written. I believe that if staff believes that Mr. Davis can be useful, they can reach out to him. And if it will be Mr. Davis's decision or option to whether he wants to get involved or not. If Mr. Davis feels that he can contribute and he can help in the situation, then I'm sure he'll agree to get involved. Otherwise, I don't believe Mr. Davis really wants to waste his time basically if he's not needed or if he cannot contribute. So I think that should be up to Mr. Davis to decide whether he wants to get involved if he's needed, if staff asks him. And So I really don't see a problem with this motion the way it is.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros, you're not on the board, thank you. Is that it, Councillor Sprovieri?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miles?
So does this mean that staff aren't allowed to contact anybody on the panel if they want to?
They can contact anybody they want.
There was an amendment to the motion last time. We went through all of this, and then we said, there's all kinds of expertise. If staff need to, they can contact anyone. So does that mean they're not allowed to contact anyone? Councillor Willen, is yours? But I need clarification as to Mr. Davis was part of the Blue Ribbon panel, and the motion that we had was that staff could contact anybody if they felt that they had some expertise to add to the question at hand. So that's what was passed. It could be anybody. So I'm just trying to find out if you're telling them you're not allowed to contact the Blue Ribbon panel, you can only contact Mr. Davis.
Okay.
Through you, yeah, I mean, we're still, like we've said all along, we're going to be contacting who we need, when we need to make sure we get the best university here. So we're going to continue to do that. If I can, Chair, just for council's consideration, this motion does kind of lock us in. It doesn't allow us any latitude other than, when we're looking at some confidential matters and dealing with it, land acquisition, this locks us in that he would have to be engaged in every aspect of that. Well, it's very loose in the saying engaged in the ongoing university work program. The work program has several facets to it, which includes some of that component.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Segal.
So I can't support this motion. It doesn't make, sorry. Unless you want to, I mean, at the end of the day, we had come to, I thought, a reasonable thing that if you need somebody, you go talk to them. That's the important thing. I don't understand why we're singling out one person. I understand that Mr. Davis is an amazing gentleman with a long history in the community, but a lot of the people on our panel are pretty amazing people with a lot of expertise. And so I'm hoping we can use anyone, but I don't want to see staff having to be engaging in areas that are confidential. That's our job as members of council. So if that kind of decision making needs to be made, it's got to come to council, not to a member of the public. So I have a problem with it, sorry.
Okay. Are you okay, Councillor Miles? Okay. Councillor Palashi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't really like the motion too much until the CAO kind of gave his interpretation of the motion. We're talking about a former premier of Ontario that has brought universities to Ontario. It's Brampton Billy. I think he should have status. I think he should have say in what's happening. I don't see the issue here. Like it's a former premier of Ontario, so I won't support an amendment to the as needed. I would assume that staff, if they needed anything specific from any member of the Blue Ribbon panel, that they should feel that they should be okay to phone them and to ask any questions. But I said it before and I'll say it again, like this is the former premier of Ontario and I think he should be at the table and I think he should be helping the city of Brampton obtain the best university for the city of Brampton. So I'll support the motion. I would, and more to the effect now that it does tie the hands of staff. I don't see it as tying the hands of staff. I see it as a benefit, definitely, to the city of Brampton and to staff. So that's what I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Paleshi?
So, Mr. Chair, if no other members who have not spoken wish to speak, the call to question's been called. It's a majority vote.
And we're not talking to the amendment, we're talking...
The whole question, including the amendments.
I'm sorry, did you just say including the amendment?
Calling the question is on this debate, which would include Councillor Medeiros' amendment, as well as the main motion moved by Councillor Willens.
So will we take those separately, the amendment first?
We will take them separately after we take a vote whether or not to call the question or not, which a majority is required to end debate and go to the vote.
Okay. So, all those in... I'm sorry, Councillor Gibson, did you... No?
Just going all in favor.
All those in favor of calling the question? That passes. Thank you very much.
So Mr. Chair, the first motion would be moved by Councillor Medeiros, seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. It is adding to the motion that's on the screen as required at the end. A recorded vote's been requested on that amendment from Councillor Medeiros. All in favor of the amendment, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor of the amendment is Councillor Miles, Councillor Fortini, Chair Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Gibson. All opposed to the motion, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, Councillor Moore. Mr. Chair, that amendment carries 7-4.
Okay.
I believe a recorded vote's been requested on the on this motion as amended. All in favor of this motion, please stand to be counted as amended. The amended is the motion that's on the screen with as required at the end.
Vote for amendment, they're not supposed to vote.
All in favor of the motion, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor.
We're still standing.
The motion is that we're voting on is the motion on the screen with the words as required at the end. And it is deleting the recommendation that's in the minutes. All in favor of the motion, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor of the motion is Councillor Miles, Councillor Fortini, Chair Bowman, Councillor Medeiros, Mayor Jeffrey, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Sprovieri, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, Councillor Moore, Councillor Gibson. Mr. Chair, that amendment as amended carries 11-0 unanimously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Is there any other questions on the... I lost myself. If not, thank you very much. I pass it back to you, Madam Mayor, for ratification.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleshi, seconded by Councillor Willens, that the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting of March 1st to Council meeting of March 8th be received and the recommendations be approved as outlined in the subject minutes. All in favor? That's carried. Item 11.1 was dealt with during the consideration of item 8.1. 11.2 was put into consent. 11.3, we had a presentation. We're now at 12.1. This is an item of correspondence from the Region Appeal, the election of the Chair of the Regional Municipality Appeal. Do any members have questions or comments on the correspondence? Councillor Bowman, you're still on the screen. Did you want to speak?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, I have a motion by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Paleshi, that the correspondence be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Our next item is Government Relations Matter. There is a Regional Council meeting scheduled for Thursday, March 9th. The briefing note has been distributed to members by the CAO's office. Do any members have questions regarding the information provided? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess Lowell's not here, but MLS staff. The item that Councillor Faseco is putting on at the region on helping those folks on trying to find what street it is. The one where the houses blow up. Have we ever, we've had quite a few devastating fires. When the townhouse fire we had a few years ago. And I'm just wondering if we've ever done anything like this in Brampton before. Do we know whether we have or haven't?
Mayor, to the councillor, when I left this morning, Lowell was looking into that with finance to see if we have. I think when you sent us an email, there was an example of a serious fire that happened in Brampton a few years ago. So we're looking into that for you, regional councillors, before you head out tonight.
The concern I have here is the precedence we could be setting in this. And I understand why Councillor Fonseca did it, and I understand why Mississauga may want to do that, but to bring it to the region appeal, I'm not sure whether that's the right way to do it. We know that any one of these can apply through impact to get the cost of the property. You know, if your house is gone, why should you pay taxes on it? That makes sense. You know, and I understand that. But there's still value to a property, and there's still uses on a property. You know, the report really didn't, although it gives us all the information, didn't really say whether staff wanted us to support this or not support it. And there's Lowell. So I'm just wondering where we go with this. We look like the bad guys if we don't support, and then at the same time, you know, we've never done this in Brampton. We've done other things to help, and that's where I think maybe both the region and the city of Mississauga should be going to help those folks out. But to just out and out not have them pay taxes, I'm not sure is the right way to go on this. So, hello.
Hi. Thank you, and through you, Mayor. To the answer to your question, it's we haven't provided a grant. We have provided tax relief through the process, which is normally what happens, but we haven't provided a grant to cover the unfunded portion of the tax appeal.
So that process you're talking would be the process through impact, where impact
through the impact, right,
would determine that the house is not there, therefore the value would be just the property alone. Yeah. And then I know with the one that we had, we did a lot of other things to help them through the, and so did the community. I mean, the community was great helping those folks out. So you know, I don't want to sound like I don't want to be helpful at the region appeal tomorrow, but I think it sets a real dangerous precedence to just waive taxes. If the city of Mississauga wants to do that, that's fine. Any idea what the cost of this would be?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, we've inquired through the region, but we don't know what that cost is. Again, it's not so much about the cost, but it's, and I think you said it right, it's about setting the precedent.
So I know you said here that last year we had 23 applications. I'm assuming those are applications through impact in 2016 for fire damage or otherwise, and that was a reduction of $58,000. Speaking to the chief this morning, Chief, how many fires did you tell us we had last year that could have been the same impact?
Through you, Madam Mayor, last year we had around 150 structure fires, and the vast majority of those would be residential fires.
I think the implications, I'm really glad that you gave us this information, because the implications of what she was asking us to do at the region could be tremendous. Because if you do it at the region, you're going to have to start doing it here too, so you can't just, okay, thank you. Thanks, Paul.
And actually, just one more thing through you, Mayor, to Councillor. We did revise the note just with the additional information, and more about the recommendation and from a staff perspective. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did have a fire. I'm not thinking of our Glen. I'm thinking of, we had a fire a number of years ago at a community in Ward 7 called Darris Court, and we did grant them something, but if you could find out through the clerk's office before tomorrow what we did. I know we did something, but I don't know what we did.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No.
Or your request?
Councillor Gibson had raised the issue about what we've done in the past. And then there was a development, Darris Court, which had a lot of units that were burnt to the ground. And there was something that the municipality granted or did in regards to that, over and above the normal reaching out to the community. I'm thinking it might have been about 6 years ago. So if you could just check that out. I know a lot of the homeowners were new immigrants and they didn't have insurance, and it was just devastating. So it would be good to have that information before we go tomorrow if possible. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. And I guess my question was more, was it legal for a municipality to do that? Councillor Gibson and I had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with a property owner, and it was over a penalty on the tax bill. And, you know, the message was pretty loud and clear from our staff in the tax department that they have very little flexibility or latitude to, you know, forgive penalties, make adjustments, and that it was all through MPAC. So I'm not sure what Section 107 of the Municipal Act says in terms of allowing the municipality to provide a grant. I think there's a difference between a grant and forgiveness on taxes. I know, you know, my daughter couldn't live in her house for 2 years because they were reconstructing it. They applied, and they had to apply to MPAC because they weren't living in the home. But the fact is that even a vacant piece of property in the city of Brampton has taxes levied on it. Whether somebody is living there or not, they are still, you know, there's still policing, there's still fire, there's emergency services, there's garbage pickup and regular road maintenance and whatnot that the municipality has to pay for. If every piece of vacant land and you know, could come to us to say, I'm going to build a house, but I haven't built it yet, therefore I shouldn't have to pay taxes on it. I know that this is a very unfortunate circumstance that these residents find themselves in. It's no different than the folks in the Art Glen fire, the Darris Court, as you mentioned, Councillor Miles, and Kennedy Road South a few years ago. There was a really devastating fire down there as well, where there were a lot of people displaced. And what I'm hearing from our tax department is that we haven't made any allowances through our tax department. Doesn't mean those folks haven't taken action through MPAC, but so can we even legally do this? Has what Mississauga done, is it legal to forgive taxes? Because that's what they're doing. You can call it a grant back if you want, but at the end of the day, it's forgiving taxes. And I see Dennis Squires looking like he can hardly wait to respond.
I would suggest, through you, Madam Mayor, that the question is something to which legal could respond if council wished legal to return back with a report. But I do believe it's really a question for the treasurer. There are provisions in the Municipal Act which provides for relief from payment of municipal taxes under certain circumstances, but the treasurer would be much better versed in them than I.
Okay. Maybe a little bit more detail about what those provisions are, where a municipality can give an exemption for taxes. It might be helpful. This is a tough situation for us to be put in at the region because there could be implications for us locally, and we really don't have a good handle on what that could be other than the numbers that are in here. You know, 58,000 could very much escalate into something, well, as you say in the report, 167. So.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, we'll meet with the treasurer just to make sure that our understanding of the Section 107, and perhaps we'll also consult with legal as well. Thank you.
You'd have to try and get that to the regional councils tonight.
Sure. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Willems.
Just quickly through you, Madam Mayor. Maybe you could look into on that part or otherwise, because we've got in Ward 6, we've got some property owners that their land is frozen because of the GTA West corridor being unfrozen. They can't do anything, but their municipal taxes keep going up. So maybe if you look at if that falls under or otherwise, because we've been contacted, both Councillor Collection, I've been contacted by 3 or 4 residents out there that they can't do anything with their property, but yet their taxes through MPAC.
So I appreciate that you're trying to find a way to expand, but we can only talk about the issue that, very clever, you'll have to bring this up at another juncture.
I tried.
So I appreciate that we've asked staff to turn this around fairly quickly, but the debate is tomorrow, so we do kind of need that better information in order to make an informed decision. Thank you all. Appreciate it. I have a motion moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Spovier, that the briefing note be received. All those in favor? That's carried. We're now at item 19. This is public question period. This is where we invite members of the public to come forward to the podium to ask any questions about any decision made at council at today's meeting. There's a 15-minute limit for all questions and answers. Are there any members of the public who have questions about a decision made at council's meeting today? Okay, seeing none. We're now at the portion of the meeting dealing with the adoption of the city bylaws to give effect to the city council's decision made at this meeting and previous meetings. I have a motion moved by Councillor Willen, seconded by Councillor Moore, that bylaws 38, 2017 to 47, 2017 before council at its meeting of March 8th be given the required numbers of readings taken by the mayor, the city clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. All those in favor? That's carried. Our next item of business is item 21, closed session business. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini, seconded by Councillor Moore, that council proceed into closed session to discuss matters pertaining to the following. 21.1, minutes closed session, City Council, February 22nd, 2017. 21.2, minutes closed session, Committee of Council, March 1st, 2017. 21.3, report from Mr. Zangaro, Deputy Solicitor, Corporate Services, read OMB Proceeding Ward 7, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. 21.4, report from Mr. Zangaro, Deputy Solicitor, Corporate Services, read Court Order Ward 1, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. 21.5, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, local board, and labor relations or employee negotiations personnel matter. All those in favor? I didn't actually see a lot of hands. All those in favor? It's carried. This meeting is now recessed in order for council to consider its closed session business in the 6th floor boardroom. All meetings, I'll get to that. All meetings of council must start and end in public session. After closed session is completed, council will reconvene in public session in the council chambers to complete its business on today's agenda, including reporting out on any actions arising from its closed session portion of the meeting, passing a confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings and decisions from this meeting, and adjourning the meeting. So council, it is 10 to 1. The lunch will be served in the room adjacent to here, and if I could see you back in the 6th floor boardroom at 1:45. 1:45. Thank you. I'm tired. I have to sign things.
Excuse me, ma'am, can I have your license and, what? Huh. See, Brampton license, nice job. Did you know that your City of Brampton license is the most visible thing when a dog's found on the street? As an animal control officer, this helps us get little Fluffy home and back to you safe. Minimizes the amount of stress to not only you as the dog owner, but also the dog or the cat that comes into our shelter. It's the safest way and the best ticket for your animal home.